What if love itself was a curse? Not the fairytale kind. Not the soft, honeyed dream the poets promised. But a raw, merciless force, a blade pressed to the throat, demanding surrender. Love that hunts. Love that devours. Love that drags a man into the pit of the underworld, hands bleeding, eyes blind with desperation. Orpheus knew that love. He was not just a man. Not just a poet. He was the master of song, the voice that could make the gods weep and the dead remember life. His lyre did not sing, it commanded. Rivers bent to its melody. The sun itself seemed to linger, unwilling to set while he played. And for a moment, just a breath, he had her. Eurydice. His nymph. His salvation. His undoing. Then the gods took her. A serpent's bite, a gasp of air stolen too soon, and Eurydice was nothing more than a whisper in the dark. Gone. Ripped from him. But grief is not the end of a man like Orpheus. It is his ignition. He did not weep. He did not pray. He walked to the underworld. Let that sink in. He did not seek an audience with the gods. He did not beg their favor. He took his music, his hands, his fury, and he walked into the land of the dead. And the dead listened. Charon, the boatman of the Styx, should have refused him passage. But Orpheus played. And the boat swayed with the rhythm of his grief. Cerberus, the monstrous hound, should have torn him apart. But Orpheus played. And the beast whimpered like a newborn pup. Even the damned, those who had long forgotten the taste of hope, raised their heads, reaching, yearning, remembering what it meant to feel. And so, the doors to Hades opened. Hades. King of shadows. God of finality. His heart should have been untouchable. But Orpheus played. And for the first time in eternity, even death hesitated. Then came the deal. The one rule. The single, impossible command. Walk ahead. Do not look back. Simple. Ruthless. A test sharper than any blade. One glance. One flicker of doubt. One breath of hesitation. And love. Love that had conquered the underworld, love that had turned gods into spectators, collapsed into nothing. Eurydice faded, lost forever. And Orpheus. His voice, the voice that had bent the world to its knees, fell silent. But his story did not end there. The myth says he was torn apart. The myth says the Maenads ripped him limb from limb. But myths lie. Truth is sharper. More brutal. The truth is, Orpheus touched something men were never meant to touch. Something ancient. Something forbidden. And that truth, the real story of Orpheus and Eurydice, has never been told. Until now. The lyre is silent. For the first time in eternity, the strings that once commanded gods and beasts alike do not hum. The air, once thick with melody, now clings to stillness like a wound refusing to close. Somewhere, unseen but ever present, the fates tighten their grip on the thread of a love that was never meant to last. This is where love always leads. The poets lied. They promised that love was the light that burned eternal, the force that conquered all. But love, real love, has never been so kind. It does not cradle. It does not soothe. It rips, it devours, it shatters the soul and leaves nothing but echoes of what once was. The gods know this. The myths remember. And so the stories remain, etched into time like a warning no one ever heeds. Paris and Helen. Their love burned too bright, and it set an empire to ruin. The walls of Troy fell, the rivers ran red, all for the touch of a woman the gods had made too beautiful to be left in peace. Love did not spare them. Pyramus and Thisbe. Two hearts so desperate to beat as one, they mistook the shadows for monsters. A blade through the chest, a second breath stolen by grief. Love did not save them. Medea and Jason. She gave him everything, her heart, her magic, her very blood. And when he betrayed her, she became the storm that swallowed his world whole. Love did not break her. She became the breaking. Orpheus and Eurydice. The sweetest, cruelest love of them all. He sang the world into stillness. The stars themselves leaned closer when Orpheus played. His voice was more than sound, it was sorcery. A force that bent reality itself, pulling hearts toward him like the tide obeys the moon. No mortal should have wielded such power. And yet, for all his gifts, he could not stop the venom from sinking into her skin. Could not silence the death rattle in her throat. Could not keep her hand from slipping through his. One moment. One mistake. And she was gone. But grief is not the end. Not for men like Orpheus. He did what no lover should ever do. He followed. Past the river where the dead whisper of all they have lost. Past the hound whose 3 heads have never bowed in surrender, until now. Past the tormented cries of those who will never see the sky again. Hades watched him come. The king of the dead, the god who does not bargain, did not speak. He only listened. And for the first time since time began, death itself softened. A second chance. But at a price. Walk ahead. Do not look back. It was simple. It was impossible. Because love does not walk blind. Love does not move forward without proof, without reassurance, without the trembling hand of the beloved within reach. Love looks back. And so he did. The gods had given him a command they knew he would break. Because love is not made for gods. It is made for tragedy. And love, always, is doomed to fail. The river does not move. Its waters, black as the void between stars, coil around the jagged stones like something alive. Something watching. The air is thick, pressing down on the skin, tasting of rot, of sorrow, of things long dead and still waiting. This is not a place of silence. No, silence is gentle. Silence is peace. Here, the air pulses with the weight of countless voices, whispers rising from the depths, stretching thin fingers toward the living world, pleading for something they will never have again. Orpheus stands at the edge. His breath is steady, but his hands tremble. Somewhere beyond the chasm, beyond the shadows that shift like hungry things, she is waiting. Eurydice. But first, he must cross. Charon does not speak. He is not a god, not a man, only an absence, a figure wrapped in black, his skeletal fingers curled around the staff of his boat. His hollow eyes hold no pity. He has seen love before. Seen it broken, seen it crushed beneath the weight of the underworld. Orpheus plays. Not for Charon. Not for mercy. For her. The first note pierces the air, and the underworld stirs. The river forgets its hunger. The voices of the dead fall into an unnatural hush, straining toward the music. The lyre does not weep, it commands. Charon moves. The boat glides across the water, barely skimming the surface. The Styx does not touch Orpheus, does not claim him. Even the river listens. But the underworld is not a place that forgets. The land of the dead is older than the stories men tell about it. Older than gods, older than names. It stretches beneath the earth, an endless abyss where no sun has ever risen, where the air is thick with memories no mortal should carry. A labyrinth of caverns, a prison of shadows. The gates of Hades do not creak when they open. They sigh, like something exhaling its last breath. This is where love comes to die. Thrace was a world away from this, wild, untamed, alive. The land where Orpheus was born was not made for men who built cities and temples. Thrace was a beast of a place, its mountains clawing at the sky, its forests ancient and whispering with things unseen. The wind there did not sing, it howled, tearing through the valleys like the voice of something never meant to be caged. The people did not fear the gods, they challenged them. Warriors, poets, oracles, Thrace birthed them all. And in the midst of it, him. Orpheus did not belong to men. His fingers were carved for the lyre, his voice touched by something that made even the birds pause in flight. His songs carried through the mountains like spells, bending the world to his will. The trees leaned closer, the rivers held their breath, the beasts of the earth stopped their endless hunting to listen. Even the gods listened. And Eurydice, she heard him. She was not a queen, not a daughter of kings. She was a nymph, a creature of the earth itself. Wild, untouchable, as fleeting as a summer wind. But he caught her. Not with chains, not with force. With melody. With a sound so beautiful it made the sky weep. And so they were bound. Not by law. Not by duty. By something stronger. But Thrace was not a land of peace. The same winds that carried his songs carried omens. Shadows lingered between the trees, whispering of things men could not fight. And love does not last. The day she died, the earth itself seemed to recoil. The grass where she fell turned black, the flowers wilted in protest. The snake's venom burned through her blood, cold as the breath of the dead. One moment, she was there, laughing, golden in the sun. The next, gone. The underworld swallowed her whole. And Orpheus? He was never meant for silence. Never meant for loss. The gods had given him a gift, a voice that could make the world itself kneel. But they had also given him her. And taking her back. That was a crime they would never forgive. But he did not ask for permission. Did not plead for their mercy. He stood at the edge of the underworld and stepped forward. Because Thrace had made him. Because love had unmade him. Because the dead were about to listen. The first sound wasn't human. It was something older, something sacred, a note that didn't echo, but clung to the air, as if the world itself had been split open and music was bleeding out. It hummed through the mountains, slid beneath the bark of trees, cracked stone, kissed the skin of animals with an ache they didn't understand. It was alive. And in its center, he stood. Bare feet on cold earth. Hands steady. Eyes like storms that knew silence too well. Orpheus didn't look for an audience. The earth was already listening. He played. Not for applause. Not for glory. He played because he had to. Because the sound inside him would shatter him if it didn't find a way out. The lyre wasn't crafted by mortal hands. Its strings were pulled from the breath of gods, its frame soaked in starlight, curved like the ribs of a fallen angel. His father had given it to him, not with ceremony, not with pride. With fire. With the weight of expectation. Apollo, god of light, of prophecy, of unbearable truths. Orpheus didn't worship him. He refused to. How do you worship a god when you surpass him with a song? The lyre didn't sound like an instrument. It wept. It roared. It sang in languages older than speech. It didn't need words. It was the word. The first time he played for mortals, they fell to their knees. Not out of reverence, not out of awe, but because they couldn't stand. Their legs buckled under the weight of it. Grown men wept openly. Mothers clutched their children tighter, not out of fear, but something worse, recognition. The song spoke of the things they buried deep, the grief they drank with their morning bread, the ache in their bones they thought had no name. Orpheus gave it a name. His mother, Calliope, watched from the shadows. the muse of epic poetry. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her son had already become the tale poets, would bleed themselves to write for centuries after their tongues turned to dust. The gods envied him. Not openly, no. They smiled, they praised, they gifted him laurels and gold. But behind their masks, they trembled. Because Orpheus reminded them of something they feared more than titans, more than time, more than death, truth. Because the music didn't lie. It didn't flatter. It didn't plead. It revealed. When he played before Zeus, the king of gods leaned forward, not out of politeness, but compulsion. For a heartbeat, even he forgot his thunder. The music reached into Olympus, and unmade the arrogance that sat like armor on divine shoulders. And when he played for the beasts of the earth, they forgot their hunger. Wolves rested beside lambs. Lions blinked like startled children. The wind itself slowed, thick with the weight of something it couldn't carry. But the lyre was cursed. Not by spell. Not by vengeful goddess, or jealous rival. By the very thing that made it holy. It could move the heart of the world. But it could not save her. No matter how loud he played. No matter how perfectly the notes broke through the air. Eurydice still died. And that's when his hands changed. Before, he played like a god. After, he played like a man. Ragged. Raw. Terrifying in its honesty. The strings bled under his fingers. The music became a wound. It cried out, not to be heard, but to haunt. The lyre did not resist. It, too, remembered her. When he walked into the underworld, he carried it like a weapon. But it didn't kill. It broke. Even Hades, king of the lifeless, could not withstand the sound. Even Persephone, bride of shadows, wept, not because she pitied him, but because she knew. She had once been taken, too. They let him pass. Not because they were merciful. Because they were powerless. The music held them. And as he walked through that choking darkness, the lyre didn't falter. Not once. Even as he shook. Even as his voice cracked with grief. It spoke when he could not. It led him through the shades and ghosts and silent gods, through endless corridors of bone and black, until she stood there. Eurydice. But the song couldn't hold her. Not forever. And when he turned too soon, when her eyes met his for the last time, the lyre shattered. Not physically. Not in his hands. But in the soul of it. Because there are notes that should never be played. And love, when it fails, leaves silence louder than any sound ever sung. But still, he plays. Even now, in the echoes of mountains, in the breath between lightning and thunder, in the spaces where words fall short, he plays. Because some songs never end. The wind moves, but it does not touch her. It carries the scent of damp earth, of crushed flowers, of rain waiting to fall, but she does not shiver. She walks through the forest, and the leaves do not dare to break beneath her feet. The roots do not twist to catch her ankles. The trees, ancient, watchful, lean in, their branches curling like fingers reaching, stretching, longing. They know her. They have always known her. She does not belong to them, yet she is theirs. She is not a goddess. Not a queen. Not a daughter of kings. She was not sculpted from marble, not meant for temples, not sung about in the prayers of men who fear the gods more than they love them. But nature worships her. She moves like something half-dreamed, like the ghost of sunlight passing through water. She does not command. She does not demand. She is felt. In the way the grass sways toward her. In the way the river pauses as she kneels beside it, her fingertips skimming the surface, her reflection rippling but never breaking. She is not Orpheus. She does not control the world with sound. She does not force the earth to listen, does not shackle the sky with melody. She is quieter. A whisper in the lungs of the wind. A shadow between trees. A breath stolen before it can be exhaled. But she is no less powerful. Some say she was born from the earth itself, a spirit woven from the roots of the oldest trees, from the mist that clings to the rivers at dawn. Others claim she was the daughter of the gods, sent to walk among the wild things, to be the thread between man and nature, to remind the world that not all beauty is meant to be possessed. But men have always tried to name the nameless, to carve meaning into things that were never theirs to own. Eurydice was never meant for them. She was meant for the rain, for the sound of cicadas screaming against the dusk, for the hush of the forest when the moon sighs against the earth. She was meant for the spaces between things, between day and night, between silence and song, between what is here and what is lost. And yet, he found her. Orpheus, with his golden hands and his voice that could tear the stars from the sky. He played, and the world stopped. She had spent her life listening, feeling the breath of the earth against her skin, but she had never felt this. Never felt the air tremble, as though something ancient had awoken. Never felt time hold its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. His music did not pull her toward him. It revealed her. As though she had been waiting, all this time, to be seen. And in that moment, she was no longer a shadow. She was his. But nature does not let go so easily. She was meant for the earth, and the earth does not forget its children. The soil beneath her feet, the wind that kissed her skin, the roots that twisted through the world like veins, they did not understand Orpheus. They did not understand love. They understood only possession. And when she ran through the trees, the ground caught her. The viper struck fast, fangs sinking into her skin like a whispered promise. The earth did not mourn. It simply took her back. But Orpheus was never meant to understand loss. And so he went after her. And when he stepped into the underworld, when he opened his mouth and let his sorrow slip through his lips like a wound made of sound, the dead listened. And Eurydice heard him. For the first time since the earth had swallowed her, since the air had been stolen from her lungs, she felt the world again. Felt the pull of his voice, the ache in his song, the way the darkness trembled beneath the weight of it. And so she followed. But she was still a shadow. Still a thing between worlds, a breath held but never exhaled. And when he turned, too soon, too desperate, she felt it. Felt the weight of the underworld drag her back. Felt the song end. Felt herself disappear. Not a scream. Not a cry. Just silence. Because some things are never meant to be held. Some things are never meant to be saved. And Eurydice. She was never meant to stay. The thread was spun long before he touched his lyre. Before her foot met the viper's fangs. Before the underworld swallowed them both whole. It was there, whispering in the dark corners of the world, curling through the air like a breath no one could see. It was thin, fragile, yet unbreakable. A strand in an infinite web, stretching from the heavens to the graves, binding gods and mortals alike. And it was never theirs to control. The Moirai watched. 3 sisters, older than Olympus, older than time itself. They did not rule with swords or thrones, did not command legions or raise temples in their name. They sat in the quiet, in the spaces where the world's pulse beat the strongest, and they wove. Thread by thread. Fate by fate. Clotho, the spinner, who drew the thread from nothing. Lachesis, the measurer, who pulled it between her fingers, feeling the weight of 1,000 lives, deciding how long, how short, how much they would love, how much they would suffer. Atropos, the cutter, who held the shears. Who waited. Who listened. Who knew. It did not matter if you were a god. It did not matter if the world bent at the sound of your voice. It did not matter if you could make the trees weep, if you could charm the dead from their slumber, if your love could shake the very foundations of the earth. The thread had been spun. Orpheus never had a choice. He thought he did. Thought his song could change the story, could bend the will of Hades and Persephone, could make the gods weep and soften their grip on what had already been decided. He sang, and the world listened. The underworld trembled. The dead turned their heads. The impossible became possible. But fate does not care for beauty. It does not care for sorrow. It does not care for love. Eurydice was always meant to die. She was always meant to slip away, to fade, to vanish like mist at dawn. It was written in the hands of the fates, stitched into the very fabric of existence, long before Orpheus ever laid eyes on her. Long before she reached for him. Long before she fell. And what is fate but a cruel, inevitable promise? Orpheus walked through the underworld, his steps heavy with the weight of hope, with the unbearable, gut-wrenching knowledge that he had almost won. That she was behind him, just within reach, breathing in his name, waiting for him to save her. Anatropos held the shears. She waited, her fingers steady, her expression untouched by mercy, by hesitation. She had seen it 1,000 times before. The ones who thought they could escape. The ones who thought the gods could be moved, that love was a force greater than destiny itself. She had watched kings beg. She had watched heroes fight, watched warriors scream at the sky, watched mothers claw at the earth for the children torn from their arms. She had never wavered. And she did not waver now. Orpheus turned. And the shears closed. The thread snapped, not with a sound, but with an absence. A silence that swallowed the world, that swallowed her name, that swallowed everything. Eurydice was gone. Not taken. Not stolen. Not ripped away by some vengeful god, or jealous shade. It was always meant to happen. And Orpheus, with his hands that had once commanded the heavens, with his voice that had once made even death hesitate, was powerless. Because the fates had decided. And fate does not bargain. The air was still. A silence so perfect it felt unnatural, stretched thin over the world like the final breath before a storm. And then, a sound. Not a whisper. Not a rustling leaf, or the gentle sigh of wind through the trees. It was something else, something alive, something that should not exist, yet did. A sound so hauntingly beautiful it did not belong to this world. The lyre. The strings quivered under Orpheus's fingers, singing notes too pure, too tragic, too filled with something that pulled at the marrow of existence itself. The world listened. The rivers slowed their rush to hear. The birds in the branches tilted their heads, enchanted. The very earth softened beneath him, as if nature itself had stilled in reverence. And she was there. Eurydice. The moment he saw her, the song changed. It was not intentional. He did not summon her with his music, not consciously, but as the melody spilled from his hands, the air trembled as if it recognized something inevitable. She stepped from the shade of the trees, barefoot in the grass, a presence so quiet yet so absolute that it felt as though she had been there all along, simply waiting to be seen. Sunlight wove through her hair, golden threads tangled in shadow, as if she carried dusk and dawn within her. And Orpheus stopped breathing. Because it was already written. Not in words, not in prophecy, not in the stars, but in the trembling hush between them, in the unbearable pull of something neither could name, but both could feel, an invisible force stretching across time, bending the air itself. Fate. She had heard his music before she had ever seen his face. That was how it began. A song drifting through the wild places, weaving its way into the silence where no mortal sound should have been. It found her. It called her. And without understanding why, she had answered. Orpheus spoke, but the words did not matter. They were just vessels, hollow and insignificant compared to the raw, unspoken truth that passed between them in that first glance. He had played for the gods, for the trees, for the rivers, for the very fabric of the universe. But for the first time, he played for her. The music shifted, lower now, softer, the kind of sound that seeps into the bones and lingers in the blood long after it ends. Eurydice stepped closer, the distance between them vanishing like mist beneath the sun. Something inside him broke. She was mortal. Fragile. Fleeting. A breath waiting to be stolen. And yet, in that moment, she was eternal. Eurydice reached out, fingers grazing his, the slightest touch, and the world collapsed. Not in destruction, but in meaning. Everything before this moment fell away into irrelevance. They did not fall in love. They collided. Like two celestial bodies pulled by gravity too strong to fight. Like an ending written before the beginning had even been spoken. And the fates, somewhere unseen, watched. The sun was too bright. That morning, it rose with a fevered intensity, searing gold into the sky as if it meant to burn something away. Something that shouldn't be there. The light didn't glow. It pierced. It warned. But no one saw it. They were too busy watching her. Eurydice. Dressed not in finery, but in the breath of spring itself. Her skin kissed by dew, her eyes wide with a joy too wild to last. She walked through the field with bare feet and an open heart, and every blade of grass bent beneath her, as though the earth itself bowed in reverence. And Orpheus stood waiting, lyre in hand, mouth still, eyes locked on her with something terrifying in his chest. Not love. Not anymore. It had passed love. This was something darker. Something desperate. A devotion that borders madness. A promise forged in the marrow of existence that dared the gods to break it. He had played her name into the wind. He had carved her spirit into song. He had tasted forever on her lips. Now she was walking toward him. And every step was a heartbeat. The crowd of mortals and gods, satyrs and dryads, muses and men, all watched with mouths curled in joy and hands full of flower petals. Music trembled in the air, floating like smoke from Orpheus's strings, wrapping around the guests like a spell too delicate to touch. It was a perfect day. Too perfect. The birds sang, but their calls sounded strained. Like voices forced to be cheerful under threat of silence. The trees swayed, but not with wind, with something else, something unseen that moved in rhythm with dread. And still, they smiled. Orpheus took her hand. Fire surged through him, violent, pure, alive. As if touching her completed something that had been broken since birth. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her fingers were trembling. The priest spoke words no one remembered. The gods pretended not to notice. The fates, hidden from sight, stared unblinking. There are moments in time so golden they should not exist. This was one of them. A blasphemy of beauty. A moment too flawless to be left unpunished. When Orpheus kissed her, time paused. The trees stopped. The clouds froze. The music ceased. It was a kiss that reached into the underworld and dared it to try. But death had already noticed. Somewhere beneath the earth, the silence cracked. The petals thrown into the air hung suspended too long before falling. The laughter rang too loud, echoing like a warning in a stone corridor. A black bee landed on Eurydice's shoulder and refused to fly away. And still, they danced. Hands locked. Eyes locked. Orpheus spun her, and she spun the world. Around them, joy bloomed like fire, but underneath it pulsed something colder. Something ancient. She whispered something to him. He smiled. But behind his eyes, a shadow flickered. A thought he didn't speak aloud: nothing this perfect lasts. And he was right. Far off, in the edge of the woods, something was watching. Not a guest. Not a friend. Not even a god. Something older. Something with no name. It had no face, but it knew her name. It knew Orpheus's voice. It hated joy. And it had waited long enough. The music lifted again, Orpheus coaxing the lyre into a melody that wrapped around Eurydice's waist like an oath. The song rose, delicate, soaring. And then, a gust. Sudden. Sharp. Unnatural. It rushed through the wedding like a scream held in the throat too long. The flowers shivered. The guests paused. Eurydice blinked. She smiled again, as if to shake off the chill. But it was too late. The ground had already shifted beneath them. The story was already written. And the fates were already spinning faster. Still, Orpheus played. Still, Eurydice danced. Still, the sun glared, too hot, too high, too harsh. The sky watched, silent. The shadows stretched too long. And death waited, just beyond the light. Of course. Here's the next section, told exactly as you requested, with raw emotion, spine-chilling tension, and no reprieve. She was laughing. That was the last sound the earth heard from her. Not a scream. Not a gasp. A laugh, light and fragile, spun from joy. It lingered in the air for a moment too long, like a ghost unaware it had already died. Eurydice had stepped away for only a moment. Her dress still trailed Orpheus's scent. Her lips still held the warmth of his. The wedding still echoed behind her, voices rising in song and celebration, but her feet had wandered into the trees. Perhaps to breathe. Perhaps to feel the wind without music. Perhaps to be alone with the pulse of a life newly hers. But the woods were too still. The light there was colder. And something waited in the hush. It didn't strike right away. No. It let her walk first. Let her hum some part of Orpheus's melody to herself. Let her fingertips brush across the petals of the tall white flowers that only bloomed on wedding days. Let her kneel. Let her smile. And then, a flicker. A twitch in the grass. A hiss so soft it sounded like a breath behind her ear. She froze. The wind died. The snake was already in motion. Its body was black. Not the black of shadows or coal. This was the black of void, of what comes before light. The black that dreams fall into when they become nightmares. It struck her ankle with no sound. No warning. No cruelty. Just purpose. Her body flinched, then stilled. Her hand reached instinctively to brush it off, too late. Her breath caught. Her eyes widened. But no scream came. Just a soft "oh" that drifted up through the trees like the last word in a prayer. Her legs folded beneath her. The grass accepted her weight. And then the color began to leave her, first her lips, then her cheeks, then her eyes. Like the sun was stepping away from her body. She clawed at the earth, not in pain, but in disbelief. Her fingers dug into the soil as though it could anchor her to the world. As if it would pull her back, whisper, "Not yet." But the poison was fast. It moved through her blood like a memory too heavy to bear. Her limbs stopped listening. Her chest tightened. Her lungs forgot how to pull in breath. Her heartbeat, once the rhythm Orpheus lived by, began to stagger, to falter, to fade. And then the light in her eyes cracked, like glass under strain. She fell with no one to catch her. The trees did not move. The wind did not return. The sky did not weep. Only silence answered. But far off, Orpheus dropped his lyre. His heart stuttered before his mind understood why. He ran. Through laughter, through petals, through hands that tried to hold him back. His feet found the path she took as if it were burned into the world itself. His lungs screamed for air, but his voice would not rise. Something inside him already knew. When he reached her, she was still warm. And that was the cruelest part. Her lips were parted, as if about to speak. Her eyes half open, staring into something he could not see. A world that had already taken her from him. Not even the gods could have written a silence this loud. He knelt beside her. He called her name. Not loudly. Not like a man shouting at the heavens. He whispered it, like a spell, like a prayer, like a plea spoken through clenched teeth. Nothing. Her skin beneath his fingers had lost its song. He placed his hand over her heart. Nothing. Then, he screamed. Not a word. Not her name. Not a question. Just a sound. Ancient. Animal. Shattering. It tore through the forest, cracked the sky, split the world wide open. Birds took flight. Trees bent. Somewhere, the underworld stirred. He gathered her body into his arms, and it didn't fight him. She didn't blink. Didn't breathe. Her head fell to his shoulder like it was always meant to rest there. He rocked her like a child. He kissed her forehead. He begged her to come back. He promised things that made the gods cover their ears. And the wind returned, not to comfort, but to listen. To carry the sound of a man breaking in half. Orpheus did not return to the celebration. There was nothing left to celebrate. He stayed with her as the sun dipped and the moon rose and the world kept turning, oblivious to its cruelty. He held her as her warmth faded, as the stars blinked into view like eyes that refused to close. When he finally stood, his legs trembled. His lyre hung across his back like a weapon made of grief. His face changed. His eyes hollow. His mouth set like stone. He walked away with blood on his hands and music in his bones. Music no longer made for joy. Music made to shake the gates of the dead. And far below, in a place where sunlight never touches, the fates turned their heads. One thread snapped. Another was pulled taut. And the underworld listened. The air hung heavy with an oppressive stillness, as if the world itself held its breath in anticipation. A lone figure stood amidst the shadows, his silhouette barely discernible against the encroaching darkness. Fingers trembling, he reached out to the lyre cradled in his arms, a gift from Apollo, his father, and the instrument of his soul. As the first note resonated, it sliced through the silence like a blade, raw and unyielding. The melody that followed was not just sound, it was anguish incarnate, a wail from the depths of a shattered heart. Orpheus played, and the world listened. Trees leaned in, their leaves quivering with each sorrowful chord. Stones wept, their cold, unfeeling surfaces now streaked with the evidence of shared grief. Beasts of the forest, both predator and prey, gathered in solemn unity, their eyes reflecting the torment woven into the music. Each note was a tear, each chord a cry, echoing the name that haunted his every breath, Eurydice. His music had once been a beacon of joy, a testament to love's transcendent power. It had charmed the nymphs and swayed the hearts of gods. But now, it was a dirge, a lament that bled from his very soul. The heavens themselves seemed to mourn, clouds gathered, heavy with unshed rain, mirroring the turmoil within the musician. The sun hid its face, casting the world into a twilight that knew no dawn. The power of Orpheus's music was unparalleled, a force that could command the inanimate to life, and soothe the most savage of beasts. It was said that his melodies could halt rivers in their course, compelling them to listen, to feel. Even the unyielding gates of the underworld had trembled and opened at his song, granting him passage where no living soul dared tread. But what was this power without the one who had inspired it? Each note he played was a plea, a desperate call into the void, hoping to reach ears that could no longer hear. His music had moved mountains, yet it could not bridge the chasm that death had carved between him and his beloved. The irony was a cruel jest of the fates, those merciless weavers, who had spun his destiny with threads of joy only to sever them with blades of sorrow. The role of music in Greek mythology was profound, a divine language that transcended mortal limitations. It was the medium through which the gods communicated, the force that bound the cosmos in harmony. Orpheus embodied this celestial art, his lyre an extension of his very being. Through it, he had once celebrated love, now he mourned its loss, each melody a testament to the duality of existence, ecstasy and agony, creation and destruction. As the final note lingered in the air, a fragile echo of the tempest that had preceded it, a hush fell over the assembled throng of nature's denizens. The wind dared not stir, the earth seemed to pause in its rotation, all in reverence to the depth of sorrow laid bare. Orpheus stood motionless, the weight of his grief pressing down upon him like the very firmament. His lyre, once a conduit of divine jubilation, now bore the burden of his lament, its strings damp with the tears of a broken heart. Yet, in this abyss of despair, the power of his music remained undiminished. It was a force that defied the boundaries between the living and the dead, a bridge between realms. Through his sorrow, Orpheus had tapped into a truth that resonated through the ages, that music, in its purest form, is the echo of the soul's deepest yearnings, a cry into the void that, perhaps, just perhaps, might be heard. And so, with the weight of his grief as both his anchor and his muse, Orpheus played on. Each note a tear, each melody a memory, each song a step deeper into the abyss of his sorrow. The world listened, enraptured and broken, as the greatest musician of all time poured his soul into the void, seeking solace in the only way he knew, through the haunting, inescapable power of his music. The earth did not shake. There was no thunder, no flash of lightning, no scream from the sky to mark the moment. Just a man kneeling in the dust, his hands buried in the soil where her breath had once lingered. Silence bled into him. A silence so loud it crushed his ribs inward. Her name quivered on his lips, but even that sound, her name, was afraid to exist in a world without her. He did not sleep. He did not eat. He did not speak. He stood and he walked. South, past fields, through forests that no longer sang. The lyre on his back was dead weight, but he carried it like a coffin. His steps were not fast. They were deliberate. Every footfall was a refusal. A denial. Not of death, but of surrender. Orpheus had one thought, and it scorched him from the inside. She is not gone. Not truly. Not while I still breathe. And so he walked toward death. The mouth of the underworld does not welcome. It waits. A cavernous hunger carved into the base of the world, it yawns open without expression, like a throat prepared to swallow. The air there tastes like forgotten things, smoke, rot, and regret. Light dies before it enters. Trees near the entrance wither in silence, their roots pulling back from the black stone as if even they know, this is not a place for the living. He stepped forward. The shadows did not greet him. They reached for him. Fingers of chill and dread, pulling at the corners of his mind, whispering truths he didn't want to hear. He pressed on. Down. Past the fields of asphodel, where the indifferent dead wandered like sleepwalkers, their faces pale imitations of memory. Past the river Lethe, whose waters pulsed with forgetting. He did not drink. He would carry the weight. All of it. The underworld is not chaos. It is structure. Order. Balance. Every soul weighed, every fate sealed. But what could law do against music? What could eternity do when one man refused it? When Orpheus played, the underworld listened. The first note slipped from his fingers like blood from a wound, unwelcome, but real. Raw. The walls trembled. The shadows flinched. His voice followed, cracked and shaking and alive. He sang her name, not as she died, but as she lived. Laughed. Danced barefoot in fields. He sang of her warmth in the morning, of her fingers brushing his neck. He sang of the space in his chest where she used to live. Cerberus, the beast with 3 throats full of teeth, stilled. His growls faded into something softer. A whine. He lowered his heads and let the mortal pass. The judges of the dead, the ones who had seen every betrayal, every crime, every unspeakable sin, they wept. Even Hades, the god of unyielding silence, leaned forward in his obsidian throne. Beside him, Persephone, the stolen queen, placed a hand to her heart and closed her eyes. There are laws that even gods must obey. But for a moment, they bent. Orpheus begged not with words, but with agony laced in melody. He offered them nothing but truth, and that truth was unbearable. Love that does not die. Loss that does not fade. Hope so stubborn it could shame the stars. And they let her go. But not without rules. She would walk behind him. Not beside. Not in his arms. He could not turn. He could not look. Not once. Not even to see if she was real again. Trust would be the final trial. And if he failed, she would vanish. Not back into death, but into the kind of nothingness that even the underworld fears. He nodded. He didn't speak. His hands were shaking too hard to play anymore. He walked. The path upward was long. The walls breathed. Whispers scraped at the edges of his sanity. She was there, he felt her, footsteps soft as ash on stone. But he couldn't hear her breath. Couldn't hear her heartbeat. What if she wasn't there? What if it was a trick? He gritted his teeth. The light grew. Every step forward dragged chains of doubt behind him. The silence between their footfalls grew too loud. He wanted to scream her name. He wanted to stop and fall to his knees and beg her to speak. But he didn't. Until the light touched his face. The world above. And then, he turned. It was not a decision. It was an ache, a reflex, the desperate plea of a man who had spent too long in the dark. He just wanted to see her eyes. She was there. Her hand reached for his, inches away. And then, she was gone. Not slowly. Not like death. Like air from a lung. Like warmth from a room. Like waking from the best part of a dream and forgetting it all in the same heartbeat. Her scream was silent. He reached for her, but she was already a shadow. And the shadows do not give back. The underworld did not gloat. It did not laugh. It simply closed. Behind him, silence. Before him, a world he no longer recognized. He had brought his music into death. He had bent gods and beasts. But in the end, he could not defeat the one truth that ruled them all: fate does not bargain. It waits. And it watches. And it takes. The boat was already there. It hadn't drifted in. It hadn't arrived with the sound of oars or the creak of wet wood. It was just there, silent, black as the river it floated on, motionless as bone beneath the skin. The water did not lap against its sides. The current did not move. Even the wind, elsewhere so cruel, bowed its head and held its breath. The river Styx was waiting. And so was he. Charon stood still in the boat, like a statue carved from grief. His hands, skeletal and grey, clutched the shaft of the oar without moving. His eyes, if they were eyes at all, glowed with something that was not light. Not warmth. Not rage. Just hunger. Endless and old. Not for flesh, not for gold, but for duty. The kind that binds forever. No one passed without payment. No one crossed for free. And Orpheus had nothing. No coin pressed into the mouth of the dead. No obol tucked beneath his tongue. Just a lyre and a heart torn open, still bleeding from the loss he would never recover from. Charon said nothing. He did not need to. His presence was already a refusal. Orpheus stepped forward. The shore crumbled beneath his foot, but he didn't stop. The air was thick here, thick with mourning. It clung to his skin, wrapped around his throat. He couldn't swallow. He couldn't speak. But he could play. His hands moved before he could think. Not out of hope. Not even desperation. But instinct. It was the only thing left. He touched the strings, and the silence split open. A single note floated out, fragile as a breath in winter. Charon did not move. Another note. Then another. They fell into the stillness, and the Styx began to shudder. The black water rippled, not from wind, not from tide, but from memory. Because the song did not beg. It remembered. Orpheus played love like it was a wound. He played grief like it was fire in his veins. He played longing so true it carved into the shadows and made them weep. The strings wept too, bending under the weight of sorrow, each vibration soaked in truth too heavy for words. And something shifted. Charon's head tilted. Just slightly. The kind of movement that would go unnoticed by gods, but to Orpheus, it was a thunderclap. Still, the ferryman said nothing. But he listened. The song grew. Orpheus's fingers danced with trembling fury, his knuckles white, his eyes dark hollow, staring not at the boat, not at the river, but at the place where she once was. The world blurred. Time bent. And the Styx began to change. It writhed beneath the boat, like a beast too long starved. The cries of forgotten souls rose with the current, their fingers breaking through the surface in silence, clawing not for escape, but for the sound. For the grief that touched even them, lost and faceless in eternity. Orpheus played not to plead. He played to be heard. And for once, even the ferryman listened. Charon stepped forward, the boat creaking for the first time in centuries. Not from weight. From awe. He extended his hand. Orpheus froze, the final note still trembling in the air. He searched the dead man's face for something human. But Charon was not a man. He was duty, shaped into a shape. He was obligation, hollowed into bone. And yet, the hand remained outstretched. No coin. No toll. Just silence. A silence that, this time, meant yes. Orpheus stepped into the boat. The Styx hissed in protest, but it could not stop the old laws now shattered. The oar dipped into the black water, and the boat glided forward, smooth, certain, silent. He didn't speak. Neither did Charon. But the music remained in the space between them, still echoing in the waves. Still clinging to the broken air. A song that had no end. A cry so powerful it made death pause. They passed the drowning souls, the whispering shades. They passed laments and echoes and the weight of everything forgotten. And still, the music pulsed between every shadow, every stone. It wasn't Orpheus who crossed the river. It was love. And it paid its own price. The growl started low, so low it didn't touch the air, but the bones. Not a sound. A tremor. A warning. And then it rose. The shadows ahead twisted like writhing smoke, and out of them stepped a thing that should not exist. 3 heads, 1 body, eyes lit with different hungers. The first snarled with teeth soaked in blood from centuries of silence. The second stared, unblinking, filled with something colder than death. The third drooled, its maw trembling with anticipation, not of flesh, but of fear. Cerberus. He did not bark. He did not rush. He waited. Waiting was worse. The space around him was cracked, scorched, soaked in the silence of finality. Yet, beneath the euphoria, a gnawing despair took root. She was there but not, tangible yet untouchable. His fingers hovered over her marble skin, aching to feel the pulse of life beneath. Nights became torment, dreams a battleground where desire and reality waged war. He would wake, breathless, reaching for a warmth that wasn't there, the coldness of the stone a bitter reminder of his solitude. The festival of Aphrodite approached, the city alive with fervor and devotion. Pygmalion, driven by a desperation that bordered on delirium, adorned his creation with the finest garments, draping her in silks that whispered against her unyielding form. He placed jewels upon her neck, rings upon her fingers, each ornament a silent plea to the goddess of love. With a final, lingering gaze, he left his workshop, the weight of hope pressing heavily upon him. The temple was a cacophony of prayers and offerings, the air thick with the scent of burning incense. Steady. Unafraid. Or maybe too broken to fear anything anymore. The melody wound through the air like a thread trying to mend something long shattered. Cerberus moved again. Closer. The left head growled, teeth snapping once, sharp and final. The right one snarled. But the middle head, pausing, shifting, listening. Orpheus closed his eyes. The music came from someplace so hollow it shouldn't have had sound. A place grief had emptied. He played not to save himself. He played to be understood. To be heard by something that had never known love, only command. Only punishment. Only the taste of trespassers and screams. The beast lowered its body. Not fully. Not relaxed. But paused, like the music had reached something even time had forgotten inside it. 3 heads. 3 natures. 1 heart, buried somewhere beneath all that bone and blood. Orpheus found it. His music twisted with memory. He gave the beast sorrow, wrapped in lullabies. He gave it pain softened by harmony. He gave it what it had never been given, gentleness. The heads began to sway. Not in rhythm. Not in peace. But in confusion. As if something ancient was trying to crawl to the surface. Something that hurt more than hunger. Orpheus stepped closer. Cerberus growled again, but it was quieter now. Like a storm losing power. Like rage remembering it once had a mother. He played faster. Not louder. Faster. Each note like a heartbeat, raw and rapid. Fear and hope twisted together. The sound of a soul racing toward something it cannot touch, but must reach. The music surged, not just in melody but in will. A command without force. A request without words. Let me pass. The beast did not bow. But it moved aside. The middle head turned to follow the music, like it couldn't bear to let it go. The left one still trembled with fight, the right with unease. But the body did not attack. The claws did not strike. The path behind Cerberus opened like a wound in the world. And Orpheus walked through it. The music never stopped. It followed him, and so did the gaze of the 3 heads. Silent now. Almost still. Frozen between instinct and something like longing. And long after Orpheus had passed, long after the last note faded into the cracked stone floor, Cerberus sat there. listening to something that no longer played. The throne room did not echo. There was no sound, yet every footstep Orpheus took felt like it screamed across eternity. The silence here was not absence. It was presence. Heavy. Watching. Breathing. Every inch of the chamber was carved from shadows, the air stiff with the weight of judgment older than time. He stood on the threshold, heartbeat rattling in his throat, his lyre cradled like a dying thing in his arms. It was too quiet to pray, too final to hope. And then, they were there. Hades. Still as stone. Crowned in darkness, eyes hollow yet burning. He did not speak. He did not need to. The cold around him was his voice. The throne he sat upon pulsed with the souls of the dead, shifting like faces caught in windless fire. One look, and Orpheus felt his blood retreat, as if trying to flee back into the earth. Persephone. Not softer. Not brighter. Not gentler. Beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. Her gaze pinned him, unwavering, and her hands, white and still, rested upon her lap like weapons she hadn't yet decided to use. Her presence was not warmth. It was hunger held in silence. The spring queen in winter's cage. They waited. Orpheus couldn't breathe. The strings beneath his fingers quivered. He raised the lyre. No words. Only sound. The first note was cracked, wounded, trembling with the weight of what he had seen, what he had lost, what he had come to plead for. He didn't bow. He didn't kneel. He bled into the song, and let the music fall like tears. He gave them Eurydice. He gave them her laugh in the sunlight. Her voice before it broke. Her hands in his. Her final scream swallowed by the grass and the venom. He gave them the ache in his chest, when he woke and forgot she was gone for half a second, before it came back and crushed him. He gave them the silence where her voice should have been. And they listened. Not with kindness. Not with pity. With judgment. The music twisted, softer, more desperate, the notes pulling tighter, like thread straining against a needle that kept ripping through his heart. It wasn't just mourning. It was need. Raw, naked, undeniable. The need to undo what had been done. The need to pull a single soul back from the jaws of the impossible. Persephone's eyes flicked downward, just once, at the movement of his fingers, the trembling of his shoulders, the sound of something human enough to hurt gods. And still Hades did not move. His silence stretched like a blade. But Orpheus kept playing. Because if he stopped, he would scream. He showed them the meadow. The wedding. The way she looked running barefoot through grass, she would never touch again. He painted her with sound, her breath, her skin, the way she leaned into him as if there was no death in the world. The underworld held its breath. No monsters stirred. No wails echoed. The walls, black and dripping with centuries of grief, leaned closer to hear. The souls in the stone paused their writhing. And still he played. Until there was nothing left. No melody. Just a final note stretched, so thin it snapped into silence. And he stood there. Empty. Nothing but skin and salt and shaking fingers. Persephone spoke first. Her voice was not soft. But it carried something unexpected, something sharp and splintering, like glass remembering what it was like to be whole. She said nothing of love. Nothing of mercy. Only one word, why? And Orpheus, through cracked lips and air that burned to breathe, whispered, because I cannot live with her gone. Hades stirred. The king of silence, death's first breath, raised his eyes, and the weight of that gaze nearly brought Orpheus to his knees. But he stayed standing. Just barely. He didn't speak. He didn't beg. He just waited. There are no laws in the underworld that bend. But love, when it is raw enough, real enough, broken enough, it bruises even the gods. Hades looked at Persephone. She nodded once. And the walls seemed to breathe. The throne room shuddered with something old, something torn. And for a single heartbeat, the silence changed. It was no longer final. It was promise. But it came with a price. The silence after the verdict was colder than before. Not relief. Not hope. A silence carved from the sharp edge of a deal that could break a soul. Hades leaned forward. His voice didn't thunder. It didn't echo. It struck like frost on bare skin, quiet, thin, cruel in its restraint. She may follow you. Orpheus didn't move. But, Hades continued, you must not look back. A pause. Not once. Not a breath. Not until you both stand in the world of the living. That was it. No reasons. No explanations. Just the rule. Final. Simple. Brutal. The words hung in the air like the scent of iron, clean, sharp, deadly. Persephone did not speak. She watched Orpheus with something unreadable in her eyes, pity, maybe. Or warning. Or both. And Eurydice. She wasn't there. Not yet. She would follow. If he obeyed. Orpheus bowed his head. His throat ached with unshed words, but none of them mattered. He turned. And began to walk. The halls of the underworld stretched before him like a wound that would never close. Stone. Shadow. Whispers in the cracks. He stepped forward, each footfall heavier than the last. Behind him, he heard nothing. No breath. No steps. No voice. Just silence, dense, deafening, drowning. He knew she was there. She had to be. He clutched his lyre to his chest. He didn't play. Not now. Every note would be a betrayal. Every chord might break the silence that held her life together. One sound, and he'd fall apart. So he walked. And walked. The path twisted. The light, if it could be called light, flickered like dying memory. He could feel the exit pulling at him, calling through the layers of shadow and stone, a distant thread of warmth beyond the chill. But still, no sound behind him. No hand in his. No voice to say, I'm here. His thoughts began to rot. What if Hades had lied? What if this was punishment disguised as mercy? What if she'd been left behind, standing in the dark, alone, reaching out to a man who would never turn back? The silence mocked him. His knees nearly buckled with each step. Not from exhaustion, but from fear. Every heartbeat whispered, look. Every muscle in his neck burned to twist. He clenched his jaw. Kept walking. But the road stretched longer. Time twisted. Was it hours? Minutes? A breath held forever. He thought of her face. How it looked the last time he saw it. Twisted in pain, lips pale, eyes wide and filled with something worse than fear. And now, nothing. Nothing but darkness behind him and the choking ache of faith. He whispered her name. Quiet. Barely a breath. No answer. His chest hollowed. His hands shook. He bit the inside of his cheek until he tasted blood. He wasn't sure if he was breathing anymore. And still he walked. He passed the river again, Styx curling like smoke beneath the rocks, the silence of Charon's boat echoing in his memory. The ferryman had watched him go. Had said nothing. Had nodded once, as if knowing how cruel this bargain truly was. Still no sound behind him. The pain in his chest grew louder than thought. He pictured her struggling to keep up, her legs weak from death, her body barely holding together, reaching for him, silently pleading, and him, cruel, heartless, blind to her suffering. What if she'd fallen? What if she was calling his name, and he couldn't hear? What if she was reaching for him now and there was no one there to catch her? His steps faltered. He clenched his eyes shut. Walk. 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 But the light was close now, real light. Golden. The color of life. The color of mornings that no longer belonged to him. He saw it spill onto the floor like warmth remembered, and he almost collapsed from the weight of it. He stepped into it. Sunlight. Air that didn't taste like ashes. He gasped. His knees hit the ground. He was free. And in that moment, he forgot. He forgot the exact words. He forgot the distance left. He forgot the silence was the price. And he turned. She was there. So close. So real. Eyes wide. Mouth parted. Reaching for him, her fingers brushed his. And then she screamed. Not from pain. From loss. She was being pulled. Dragged back. Her eyes filled with horror and betrayal and love, all at once. He screamed her name. Ran to her. But it was too late. Her body unraveled like smoke in wind. Her mouth moved, one last time, and she was gone. Gone. This time, forever. Because he looked. Because he couldn't wait. Because trust, in the end, was heavier than grief. The shadows didn't follow him, they clung to his back like a second skin. Each footstep forward peeled him away from death, but the grip of it hadn't loosened. Not yet. Not fully. The path was narrow, endless, as if time itself refused to move until he proved himself worthy. Orpheus walked. And behind him, silence walked too. He could feel her there, couldn't he? He had to. The way the air shifted slightly, like the soft rustle of breathless movement. The way his heartbeat stuttered not from fear, but from knowing, that she was there, just out of sight, just out of reach, every step closer to life. To light. To love. But doubt gnawed at the edges. Not like fire. Like ice. Slow. Quiet. Unseen. What if she wasn't? What if the gods had mocked him? What if this was the punishment, hope sharpened to a blade? He gripped his lyre until his knuckles screamed. No songs now. Only silence. A silence so thick it pressed against his ribs, made it hard to breathe. It crawled down his throat like smoke, coiling, twisting. He wanted to speak her name. Just once. Just a whisper. Just enough to hear her voice in reply and know she was real. Still there. Still his. But he said nothing. He had to trust. And trust was heavier than stone. The tunnel curved. The blackness shifted. He saw something ahead, gray fading into something brighter. Faint light. Real light. The kind that held heat. The kind that didn't flicker with sorrow. He didn't let himself hope. Hope was a noose. And then it happened. A pause. The faintest brush of air behind him stopped. His breath caught in his throat. She'd stopped walking. He froze. His hands trembled. The silence behind him changed. It wasn't just quiet. It was gone. Like a breath that ended before it began. His pulse crashed in his ears. A roar of blood, of grief, of panic. He wanted to believe she was still there. He had to believe. But faith had a cost. And Orpheus had already paid in tears, in blood, in song. Now the price was silence. He stood, shaking, on the edge of that final stretch, the edge of life itself. The mouth of the underworld was there. A breath away. Freedom. Sunlight. Warmth. And her. If she was still there. The thought stabbed him. What if she'd fallen? What if the last thread holding her together had snapped? What if, after everything, after gods and monsters, rivers and shadows, he was walking alone? The silence behind him pulsed. He clenched his jaw. Closed his eyes. She's there. She's there. But the doubt didn't listen. It laughed. He saw her face in his mind. How it looked the first time he sang for her. How it looked the last time she fell, crumpling like a broken flower into the grass. He couldn't breathe. The light ahead was golden now. Almost cruel. Calling him forward and tearing him apart. He stepped again. And again. But the silence behind him did not move. And faith cracked. He turned. Just enough to see. And there she was. For a breath. Wide-eyed. Mouth parted in surprise and love and fear and something too full to name. And then, gone. Like mist struck by sunlight. Like breath in winter. Like everything that ever mattered being ripped from his hands again. Her name tore from his throat, raw and wild, but it was too late. Too late. The path behind him was empty. He reached. Nothing. He ran back. Nothing. He clawed at the ground as if it would give her back. Nothing. Only the faintest echo of her voice, breaking apart in the dark, as if it had never been whole. The light was still ahead of him. Mocking. He stood there, hollow, mouth open, unable to speak, unable to scream, the sound stuck somewhere behind his ribs where her memory now lived like a splinter. He'd made it. But not with her. And the ascent, the cruel, beautiful, golden ascent, had become a grave. The air didn't move. It hung between them like glass, unbroken, cold, merciless. She was there. And then she wasn't. No scream. No sound. Not even a whisper. Just the hush of finality, cruel and soft, like the moment between a heartbeat and the absence of one. Eurydice didn't fall. She dissolved. Her fingers, just inches from his, turned to smoke, then shadow, then nothing at all. Orpheus reached forward too late. His hand cut through the stillness and met emptiness. His body didn't follow fast enough. His soul did. His mouth opened, but language betrayed him. What sound could name what he'd just lost? Again. He could still see her face, the look in her eyes as she realized. The slow, terrible bloom of betrayal. Not by him. Not by Hades. By hope. Her expression didn't twist in fear or scream in fury. She didn't curse him. She only looked like someone falling without moving. Like someone remembering how to die. And Orpheus watched. His legs refused to collapse. They held him upright like he deserved to stand. Like bones didn't snap under the weight of grief. His throat burned. He didn't scream. Screaming would be mercy. He just breathed. Shallow. Hollow. As if he could breathe her back. The silence wrapped around him again. But now it wasn't silence. It was absence. It ached. It howled. It tore through his chest with no sound at all, like the scream of someone gagged by guilt. She had been right there. He'd felt her breath. Her nearness had warmed his back in that endless, frozen tunnel. She had trusted him. And he'd looked. Because he loved her too much not to. Because love is fragile, reckless, selfish, and hungry. Because somewhere inside him, a voice had whispered, "What if?" He had listened. And now the light ahead of him meant nothing. Now the world above was just a sky she couldn't stand beneath. He turned to the spot where she had vanished, as if maybe, if he stayed still long enough, time would apologize. As if the gods would give him one more chance. But the underworld didn't echo kindness. It echoed only what was taken. His hands trembled. The strings of his lyre hung silent at his side. They would not sing. Not for him. Not for her. Music had failed where silence had ruled. His art, once divine, was now ash in his throat. The songs he'd written, the ones that had stirred the cold heart of Charon, the snarling beast Cerberus, the stony will of Hades himself, what were they now? Just noise. Just memory. She had vanished without resistance, and he had stood there, still breathing, still human. Still alive when she was not. The gods had set a simple rule, do not look back. And he had broken it. Because love doesn't obey. Because love claws its way through the chest and blinds you. Because faith demands silence, and silence is a monster when your heart is screaming. He stumbled forward, then stopped. There was no point. Every step without her was theft. Every second now was a wound that would never close. He touched the place where she had stood, as if the air would remember her. As if grief had shape. But there was nothing. Not a whisper. Not a chill. She hadn't just died. She had been erased. Not by Hades. By him. He sank to his knees. The cold ground pressed through his skin like blades. He didn't flinch. What pain could match this? What punishment could cut deeper than this silence? A god had given her back. And he had taken her away. He had held the miracle in his hands and crushed it with a glance. He remembered her voice, the way she used to say his name like it meant something more than sound. He remembered the softness in her laugh, the weightless way her fingers would glide over his wrist when he played. He remembered her dance, slow, wild, alive. And now she was gone. No death could match the cruelty of repetition. Losing her once had broken him. Losing her again, by his own hand, left nothing behind. Just ruin. He buried his face in his hands. Not to hide. To hold something. Anything. But even his own skin felt wrong now. He had watched her die with his eyes wide open. Not a myth. Not a legend. A man. A man who couldn't trust love enough to keep his eyes forward. A man who broke faith and was shattered in return. The tunnel was silent again. The kind of silence that dares you to scream. But he didn't. He just sat a day. Waiting for a sound that would never come. A voice that had been stolen. A soul that now belonged once more to the darkness. And it was his fault. All of it. Still breathing. Still breaking. And completely alone. The lyre had strings, but no sound. His hands touched it the way a man touches a wound, not an instrument. Not to summon beauty. Not anymore. He had not spoken in days. No one knew how long he had walked. Through forests that didn't remember sunlight. Across valleys where wind dared not breathe. Barefoot, blistered, blooded, his feet moved without permission, as if the earth itself dragged him forward, one step, another. Not toward something. Away. They said he was mad. They whispered that his eyes had seen things no man should witness. That his voice, once strong enough to bend gods, now whispered only to ghosts. But Orpheus heard none of them. He heard her. Always. In the pause between footsteps. In the groan of trees. In the hush before dawn. Not words. Just presence. A breath he couldn't reach. A rhythm he couldn't follow. She was in everything. And nowhere. Some nights, he slept. Not because he wished to, but because the body betrays even the broken. And when he dreamed, she came. Her back always turned. Her shape always vanishing the moment he reached her. And when he woke, the ache was sharper than any blade. The world hadn't changed. But he had. His music, once a fire that warmed the world, was now a tomb. When he played, birds stopped singing. Rivers forgot to move. Wolves whimpered and slunk back into the dark. Flowers withered mid-bloom. The sound carried grief like disease, contagious, unbearable, honest. He never played for others. But still they came. People followed him through cities and fields, trailing behind him like shadows that didn't belong. Hoping to hear, hoping to feel. Some knelt, some wept. A few tried to speak to him, to offer comfort, gold, prayer. He never looked at them. What was a stranger's kindness compared to the feel of Eurydice's hand? He walked. Endlessly. One day, a child reached out to him. Tugged his cloak, soft, uncertain. Orpheus stopped. The child smiled. He looked down at the child's face. The innocence, the joy, the unbroken spirit of someone who had never had to look back. And his knees buckled. He wept, silent, shaking, shattered. Right there, in the dust. The lyre fell from his shoulder and struck the ground with a hollow thud. The child stepped back, frightened. And Orpheus, the man who had once soothed Cerberus, who had moved the stones of the underworld to tears, could not even hold a smile. He gathered the lyre and walked away. The stories say he refused all love. Women who tried to hold him found only absence. He belonged to no one. He belonged to sorrow. In the woods, animals gathered around him. Not for food. Not for shelter. For grief. They understood it in a way the gods never could. He sang to them sometimes. Wordless, voiceless melodies that bled from his fingers like old wounds reopening. A song of what had been taken. A song of what he had destroyed. And they listened. They mourned with him. But nothing filled the absence. Eurydice's name was etched across every breath. Her voice haunted every string. She had been real. And now, she was nothing but sound and shadow and memory that flayed him raw with every sunrise. He had seen her vanish. He had watched her fade into death a second time. By his own doing. And there was no forgiveness for that. Not from the gods. Not from the earth. Not from himself. There were days he stood at the edge of cliffs, staring into the void below, hoping the wind would push him. Hoping gravity would offer release. But death no longer frightened him. It mocked him. He had already lost everything worth dying for. Still, he wandered. Each place he passed through grew colder behind him. As if the sadness he carried froze the soil. People told tales of wilted crops and mute flocks, of skies that wouldn't rain and wells that ran dry. Orpheus left sorrow in his wake. Not because he wanted to. Because he was sorrow now. One night, he stood beside a river. The water didn't move. It mirrored him too perfectly, empty eyes, hollow face, hair wild with neglect and wind. He stared at the reflection until he couldn't tell if it was himself or her he was watching. He touched the surface. It rippled, then stilled. And still she didn't return. The stars blinked above him, blind and unfeeling. He sang to them, barely louder than breath. A song so sad even the moon seemed to dim. But the stars didn't answer. The gods didn't answer. Only the silence did. It followed him everywhere. Wrapped itself around him like a lover. Cold, constant, unforgiving. He welcomed it. Better silence than false hope. Better pain than forgetting. And so he walked, and sang, and mourned. Not for days. Not for years. Forever. The forest held its breath. Even the wind didn't dare move. Trees leaned in like voyeurs. Birds vanished from the branches. Somewhere in the distance, drums throbbed, a low, guttural rhythm, like a heartbeat soaked in wine and rage. He stood alone. Barefoot on the cold rock, lyre in his hand, clothes torn by thorns and time, skin pale like the moon's reflection on bone. Eyes vacant. Not with madness. Worse. With clarity. The kind of stillness only a man, who had lost everything, could carry. He had stopped searching. Stopped hoping. Stopped praying. All that remained was the sound. The song. It came not from joy, not from beauty, not anymore, but from the wound that never closed. A single note, drawn slow, long, trembling like a last breath before death. The trees leaned closer. Animals in their burrows wept. And then, laughter. Not gentle. Not warm. Sharp. High-pitched. The sound of intoxication twisted into cruelty. A rustle of feet. The snap of twigs under leather and flesh. The scent of crushed berries, sweat, and something feral rising in the air like steam after blood hit stone. The Maenads. Their eyes glowed with the hunger of the forgotten. Drunk on madness, blessed by Dionysus, cloaked in ivy and snakes and lust. Their teeth glinted. Their fingers twitched. They danced with a rhythm that defied music, wild and furious, as if the earth itself had gone mad beneath them. They had heard of him. The man who shunned love. Who turned from women like they were shadows. Who refused warmth, refused wine, refused joy. The man who walked through life like it was a graveyard. They were not here to understand him. They were here to break him. He saw them coming. Did not flinch. Did not run. He played. One final song. Not for them. Not for the gods. For her. For Eurydice. The one name he had never dared speak aloud. The one ghost he had never escaped. It was not beautiful. It was unbearable. The sound scraped across the skin like ash. It made the Maenads pause. Just for a breath. Just long enough to feel it in their chests, the loneliness. The surrender. The silence of a man buried alive inside his own love. But their stillness didn't last. It enraged them. They screamed. Their dance twisted into violence. Their limbs lashed the air like serpents in heat. They surged forward, not like women, not like people, but like a storm of flesh and teeth and wrath. The first one grabbed his lyre. Tore it from him. Snapped the strings with blooded nails. He didn't resist. He looked at her. Eyes calm. As if he were already gone. The second one struck his face. Nails caught skin. Drew lines of red down his cheek. The others howled with delight. They tore at him, not to punish, not to scare, but to destroy. They wanted his silence to scream. They wanted his heart in their hands, warm and wet and beating, so they could show him what it meant to feel again. They hated his grief. Because they couldn't touch it. So they tore him open. Bone cracked. Skin split. His body became a hymn of ruin. But he never cried out. That was their final torment. He did not scream. He simply looked beyond them. Past the trees. Past the sky. Into some place they could not follow. They ripped him apart, limb from limb, fingers clawed and teeth bared, their mouths filled with prayers they didn't understand and laughter that belonged to animals. His blood painted the stones. His lyre shattered into splinters beneath their feet. And still, he didn't scream. They scattered his body across the hill. Left pieces of him between roots and rivers. His head, thrown from the cliff, landed in the stream below. And it sang. The mouth moved. Without breath. Without life. It sang her name. Soft. Endless. The waters carried it, note by note, word by word, until even the reeds on the shore wept. The Maenads fled, afraid now. Afraid of what they had not broken. Of what still endured. Orpheus was gone. But his voice remained. And the world would never be quiet again. The river refused silence. Long after the blood had dried on the stones, after the howls of the Maenads faded into wine-soaked echoes, after Orpheus' body was scattered like cursed confetti across the forest floor, the river still sang. It began as a whisper. The kind that slips beneath your skin, makes your spine stiffen, makes you turn your head, because something ancient just called your name. A song, yes. But not one meant for joy. This was the sound of grief shaped into melody. A sound too gentle to be human, too raw to be divine. It was his mouth. His head, floating along the current. Eyes wide open to a world he no longer belonged to, lips moving without lungs, without life. His throat torn, his flesh pale, but the song poured out, smooth and flawless, as if death had only sharpened the sorrow. Eurydice's name slipped from his tongue like a wound that would not close. Again and again and again. He did not forget her. Not in life. Not in the silence after. Not in the drift between worlds. The water carried him like a relic. A ghost without a grave. A voice without a body. And on the riverbanks, the lyre. Cracked. Broken. Strings frayed from the hands that once coaxed gods into stillness. The wood soaked with the last of his blood, clinging to it like memory, like promise. The wind touched it and the strings trembled. Just slightly. Just enough. One note at a time. Until it joined him. Until it sang with him. The lyre wept beside the head, two broken things refusing to die quietly. Birds stopped flying. Wolves paused mid-howl. The moon dimmed, ashamed to bear witness to the beauty of loss so pure it scorched the heavens. And the muses heard. Far from the woods. Beyond the mountaintops. In the silence where inspiration is born. They felt the ache thread through the sky like a splinter in the breath of the world. They came without sound. Without form. Draped in sorrow and starlight. They did not speak. They did not weep. They listened. To the song of a dead man who refused to forget. They found his head nestled in the reeds, still singing, the current gently rocking it like a cradle carved from eternity. They found the lyre beside him, its body cracked, but its soul still screaming in strings that remembered his fingers. The muses touched nothing. They knelt. One by one. 9 forms, 9 hearts, 9 echoes of what mortals would never understand. They did not mourn Orpheus like humans do. They mourned like creators. Like keepers of flame, who had watched their brightest light shatter beneath the weight of a love too large for gods, too wild for men. Then they moved. Not with hands. With breath. With will. The head lifted from the water, untouched by fingers, but drawn by reverence. His eyes closed at last. The song slowed, thinned, but did not stop. The lyre followed, strings glowing faintly like veins of gold beneath bruised wood. Together, they rose. The muses took them. Not to bury. To preserve. To remember. On the peaks of Olympus, far above the reach of time, they laid the lyre in the stars. Gave it a place where no madness could reach, no Maenad could touch, no forgetting could ever erase. And the music lived on. Not in performance. Not in applause. In the ache behind every chord. In the silence between notes. In the breath that breaks before a song begins. His head they laid in a cave where echoes never die. Where the wind still carries his voice, singing her name, haunting those brave, or foolish, enough to listen closely. He became the song. Not the man who played. Not the poet who wept. Not the lover who looked back. He became the thing that can't be killed. Grief turned sacred. Music carved from marrow. A ghost that doesn't haunt, but sings. The ground was cold where the light had died. No shadows. No sun. Just silence, stretched thin over the bones of eternity. Time did not pass here, it settled. It pressed down like dust on a forgotten grave. And in the quiet, something stirred. Not loudly. Not violently. A breath. A shift. The space between two heartbeats. She stood at the edge of nothing, waiting. Not hoping. Not praying. Just waiting. Her feet were bare on the stone. Her hands empty. Her eyes closed. Because she had seen enough. Felt enough. Died enough. And if there was anything left beyond this place, it would come to her now. Or not at all. Then, music. Not from above. Not from the windless air. From beneath the skin of the world. A trembling. A note that did not echo, because it didn't need to. It knew its way. Knew its purpose. Knew her. She opened her eyes. And he was there. Not walking. Not arriving. Just there. As if he had always been. As if this space had kept its shape around his absence, waiting for him to fill it. His hair hung wet, heavy with the tears of the styx. His hands were still scarred from the strings. His face, older. Quieter. And hers. He did not speak. Neither did she. They didn't have to. Words had failed them once. Words had shattered the only thing they had tried to save. So now, they stood in the stillness, stripped of language, of time, of pain, and they simply were. She stepped forward. So did he. And it did not matter how many years had passed. Or how many songs had mourned them. Or how many poets had rewritten their ending with blood and ink and broken hearts. This was not for them. This was not a story to be told. This was the moment after the final note, where silence holds the last truth. Her fingers met his. And she didn't vanish. Not this time. No gods watched. No conditions. No tests. No punishments waiting in the dark. Just the two of them, whole again in a place that had stolen everything and could steal no more. He brought her hand to his lips. She touched the mark on his neck where the Maenads had torn him apart. Both wounds. Both healed. Not forgotten. But forgiven. They walked, side by side, through a world of ash and memory, where fire no longer burned and nothing living ever reached. But they were not lost. Not anymore. Love, stripped of fear. Devotion, without doubt. Two shadows, fused at the soul. The fields of the underworld bent to them, not in reverence, but in recognition. The trees turned their dead leaves to catch the echo of his voice. The waters hummed beneath her feet. Even Hades, from his throne of silence, did not stir. He had seen what came of separating them. There would be no third death. Only this, forever. And somewhere, Far above, mortals whispered their names again. But not with tears. With awe. Because Orpheus did not look back this time. Because Eurydice did not fade. Because love, buried and broken and burnt, had found its way through the ruins. Not in sunlight. Not in life. But here. Where endings mean nothing, and everything lost is waiting still. The fire was never meant to warm, it was meant to burn. And in the flickering dark, voices circled. Not loud. Not soft. Just steady. Repeating a name older than death. Orpheus. A whisper passed from mouth to mouth, heart to heart, like breath held too long beneath water. There were no temples. No statues. Just ash, bones, and silence where the truth lived, waiting for those who dared bleed for it. He had seen the underworld. Walked through it. Not in a dream. Not in a tale. In the cold, rotting truth of it. He had stood where the soul sheds its skin, where names fall away like dead leaves. He had loved through it. He had lost through it. That was why they listened. The Orphics didn't pray. They remembered. They knew. Behind every sacred rite, behind every whispered hymn and veiled symbol, his story pulsed like a second heartbeat. Not because it was beautiful. Because it hurt. Because it warned. Because it burned. They didn't chant for gods. They chanted to become. To tear the veil. To walk, as he had, through the rotten fire and silence, to the place where the soul could choose. He was more than a man with a lyre. He was the proof that music could wound the world. That sound, real sound, was not made for comfort. It was made to break. And in the breaking, reveal what lay beneath. Strip away the skin of things. Bring gods to stillness. Make death himself pause mid-step, spine cold. When he played, it wasn't notes. It was grief. Pure, howling grief. It was love, wild and violent and stupid. It was faith sharpened into a blade. And when he lost her, again, it didn't end. It started something no one could stop. They called it Orphism. But it wasn't religion. It was memory, set to rhythm. The raw scream of a man who looked into the pit, wept, and sang anyway. The Bacchantes tore him apart, because he refused to forget. Because he didn't want wine. Or noise. Or forgetful joy. He wanted truth. He wanted her. They couldn't stand that. So they silenced him. But they didn't win. His head kept singing. Even severed. Even blood-soaked. Even drifting on a dark river to a nameless shore. The sound didn't stop. The voice didn't die. It echoed through time, through cults, through shadows cast on cave walls, through the hearts of those who knew that this life, this fragile, breakable moment, was not the end. The Orphics said, the soul remembers. They believed it moved. Returned. Suffered. Loved again. They believed the body was a cage. A trial. A passing flame. And Orpheus. He was the first to hold that truth in both hands and not flinch. They carved his words into gold plates and buried them with the dead. Not poetry. Instructions. Maps for the soul. Which river to cross. What names to speak. Where to go. What to avoid. They weren't afraid. They wanted to go back. To walk the darkness again. To find what he had found. Because he hadn't failed. He had shown them it was possible. That music could guide you home. That love, even crushed by gods, even strangled by fate, left something behind. That the silence was not empty. It was waiting. For another voice. For another heartbeat. For another fool, brave enough to sing. The torchlight flickered against the damp stone walls, casting elongated shadows that danced like specters in the silence. In the heart of the Roman underworld, where echoes of lost souls whispered through the corridors, a solitary figure stood, Orpheus, the eternal mourner, his lyre clutched tightly in trembling hands. The air was thick with the scent of decay and despair, yet his music pierced through, a haunting melody that defied the oppressive gloom. Virgil, the Roman poet, immortalized this moment in his Georgics, weaving a tale where love and loss intertwined. Eurydice, Orpheus's beloved, had succumbed to a serpent's bite, her life extinguished in an instant. Unable to accept her fate, Orpheus descended into the underworld, his music a plea to the gods. Proserpina, moved by his sorrowful strains, granted him a chance to reclaim his love, but with a caveat: he must not look back until they reached the world above. Yet, as they ascended, doubt gnawed at Orpheus's heart. In a moment of weakness, he turned, only to watch Eurydice fade into the shadows once more, lost to him forever. This tale of love and tragedy resonated through the ages, finding new life in medieval and Renaissance literature. In the Christian allegories of the time, Orpheus's descent mirrored Christ's harrowing of hell, where he liberated souls from eternal damnation. The parallels were striking. Both figures ventured into the realm of the dead, driven by love and compassion, challenging the finality of death itself. Dante Alighieri, in his Divine Comedy, drew upon this rich tapestry of myth and allegory. Guided by Virgil, Dante traversed the circles of hell, witnessing the torments of the damned. In this journey, Orpheus's influence was palpable, a testament to the enduring power of love and the human spirit's resilience in the face of despair. Through the centuries, the story of Orpheus and Eurydice evolved, reflecting the changing beliefs and values of society. Yet, at its core, it remained a poignant reminder of love's capacity to transcend even the boundaries of life and death. A single note hung in the air, trembling like a heartbeat on the edge of silence. It was not played, it was born, raw and aching, from the strings of a lyre that had once sung to gods and ghosts alike. In that suspended breath, centuries collapsed. Orpheus stood again, not in marble or myth, but in the fevered visions of poets and composers who refused to let him die. The Romantic poets, with ink-stained fingers and souls ablaze, summoned him from the shadows. Rainer Maria Rilke, in his sonnets to Orpheus, did not merely write, he conjured. Each line a resurrection, each stanza a spell. Orpheus, the eternal singer, became their muse, their mirror, their madness. They saw in him not just a man, but the embodiment of art's power to defy death. On the operatic stage, his voice found new life. Claudio Monteverdi's El Orfeo breathed into him a Baroque grandeur, while Christoph Willibald Gluck's Orfeo ed Eurydice stripped him bare, exposing the raw nerve of his longing. In these performances, Orpheus's descent into the underworld was not just a journey, it was an aria of agony, a crescendo of hope, a coda of despair. Cinema, too, could not resist his allure. Jean Cocteau's Orpheus, 1950, reimagined him as a poet haunted by visions, his reflection a portal to the beyond. In Marcel Camus' Black Orpheus, 1959, the myth danced through the favelas of Rio during Carnaval, where samba rhythms masked the inevitability of fate. These films did not retell his story, they relived it, each frame pulsing with the tension between love and loss. In modern times, Hadestown, Honoris Mitchell's folk opera, cast Orpheus as a dreamer in a dystopian world, his music a rebellion against despair. Eurydice, weary and hungry, chose the underworld not out of death, but necessity. Their love, tested by poverty and power, resonated with audiences who saw in their struggle a reflection of their own. The stage became a battleground where hope fought against the pull of forgetfulness. Yet, Orpheus and Eurydice are not alone in the pantheon of tragic lovers. Pyramus and Thisbe, whose whispered words through a wall led to a double suicide, echo their fate. Cupid and Psyche, separated by mistrust and trials, eventually find reunion. But Orpheus and Eurydice, their story ends in a glance, a single, fatal look. No reunion, no redemption. Just the echo of a song that fades into silence. This is what sets them apart. Their love is not a tale of triumph, but of the fragility of trust. It is a reminder that even the most beautiful melodies cannot always alter destiny. And yet, the world cannot stop listening. Artists continue to resurrect them, to retell their story, to find in their tragedy a reflection of our own yearning for connection, for meaning, for a love that defies the darkness. In every adaptation, Orpheus sings. And in every audience, hearts break anew. The myth endures, not because it offers solace, but because it confronts us with the raw, unflinching truth of love's power and its limits. And as long as there are voices to sing and ears to listen, Orpheus and Eurydice will never be truly lost. The torches flickered without wind. Their flames licked upward in eerie silence, steady as if afraid to move. And in that stillness, so absolute, so final, there came a sound that did not belong. One note. Thin as breath. Piercing as grief. A single, trembling string vibrating in the darkness beneath the world. The underworld did not welcome music. It swallowed it. Choked it with soil and shadow. But Orpheus played anyway. He stood at the edge of the STYX, his feet bare, his heart torn, and he sang to death itself. Not with pleas. Not with pride. But with the raw, naked sound of sorrow, so full of yearning it made even the theremin pause mid-awe. The song was not beautiful in the way mortals understand. It was the kind of music that hurt. That opened old wounds and poured salt into them. That left no room for lies. This place, Hades, the shadowed land, was no metaphor. It was the truth that waited beneath every heartbeat. The Greeks knew it well. They feared it. Worshipped it. Gave it names they dared not speak aloud. But in myth, it was more than a tomb. It was the final judge. The mirror that stripped away flesh and fame, and left only the soul. Orpheus, the mortal who defied silence, descended not with weapons, but with strings. He sang, and Cerberus stilled. He sang, and the tormented wept not for themselves, but for him. Even the stone heart of Persephone cracked beneath the weight of his voice. And Hades, cold, unmoved, eternal, opened the gates. No mortal was meant to walk out of that place. No song should have been strong enough. But Orpheus carried in his music something older than law, something holier than gods. The Greeks believed music wasn't mere sound. It was order. Cosmos. A thread spun by the divine that could bind chaos itself. Apollo's lyre had strung the stars into constellations. The siren's call could bend men to madness. And Orpheus, he wielded music like fate, bending even death to his will. Almost. But even in that power, the price waited like a knife in the dark. One look. One backward glance. The rules of the underworld are not kind. They are not fair. They are ancient, cruel, absolute. And when he turned, when Eurydice vanished like smoke, his music broke. No scream. No shatter. Just silence. That awful, echoing void. As if every note he had ever played had been unmade in a single heartbeat. He left that place not as a victor, but as a ghost among the living. The underworld had taken more than his love. It had taken meaning. The Greeks knew what that meant. To walk the earth hollow, untouched by joy, marked by shadow. To live, but not truly. To exist after one's soul had already been buried. Still, the world could not forget the sound he made. In every myth, music is never just melody. It is weapon. It is worship. It is a language the gods cannot refuse. The ancients believed it could call the stars to dance, tame wild beasts, crack mountains, calm storms. And no one sang as Orpheus did. Because his music came from pain. Real, unforgiving pain. The kind that reshapes the world. He did not ask for worship. He did not build temples. He did not seek glory. He only played. And the sound of that grief spread like wildfire through time. It burned through rituals, through mystery cults, and sacred hymns whispered behind closed stone doors. The Orphics held his name in reverence, their rites shrouded in secrecy, their chants echoing with his sorrow. They believed what he touched, the underworld, the gods, the veil between life and death, made him more than man. A prophet. A guide for the soul. And always, always, the lyre. Even after his limbs had been torn from him, even after his head floated, singing, on the Hebrus River, his lyre was found. Preserved by the Muses, strung with silence and divinity. They placed it in the sky, above the noise of the world, among the constellations. Not for honor. Not for memory. But because no one could bear to silence him completely. Orpheus was never just one man. He became something else. A symbol carved from agony. A whisper against the finality of death. A sound that refuses to fade. And even now, when music plays in a minor key, when a violin sobs through the silence, when a song makes your heart clench without reason, you hear him. Not in words. Not in notes. But in ache. The underworld never gave him back what he loved. But it could not hold his song. And still, he plays. For oh, there was a sound, barely a breath, just the scrape of a footfall behind him. Too soft to echo. Too real to ignore. His shoulders stiffened, and the world narrowed. In front of him, the light. Behind him, the darkness. Between them, her silence. Eurydice. Or not. The underworld plays cruel games. Her fingers had grazed his hand moments before. Not tightly. Not begging. Just enough to remind him she was real. Still behind him. Still his. Still coming home. But silence can lie. And in that silence, his mind cracked. One glance. That's all it took. A twitch of muscle, a falter in faith. He turned. Not with arrogance. Not out of defiance. But with panic. With that awful, burning thought, what if she's not there? What if they tricked me? What if I am walking alone? He turned, and the world ended. She reached for him, her face still soft, her mouth already parting in relief, and then she was gone. No scream. No flash of light. Just absence. Her body pulled backward into the dark like she was never there. His name might have been on her lips. But he'd never know. Doubt is not loud. It doesn't shout. It whispers. It coils behind the ribs and feeds off heartbeat. And it waits. It waited in him like a serpent. Quiet. Patient. Until the moment mattered most. That's the wound no music can mend. Not the loss. But the failure. He was warned. He was told. One rule. One step at a time. No turning, no looking, no asking. Trust. But trust is fragile when fear walks beside you. And fear was thick as smoke in that place. Every shadow looked like a hand ready to pull her back. Every silence felt like goodbye. The Greeks understood. They knew that to trust blindly was almost inhuman. And Orpheus, gifted, holy, broken, was still a man. He carried his fear like a shadow stitched to his heels. And in that single moment, he let it lead. What makes the story unbearable is not the punishment. It's the fact that we understand him too well. We've all felt it. That tremble. That dread. That unbearable silence between heartbeats when love is just out of reach, and we're not sure if it's following. The myth cuts because it's real. Because it strips us bare and shows us the truth. We are capable of destroying the thing we love most with the flick of a glance. Orpheus wasn't proud. He wasn't careless. He was afraid. And that's what doomed him. He is not the fool. He is the mirror. Every tragic lover carries that same wound. Pyramus with the blood-soaked veil. Thisbe with the blade. Psyche with her oil lamp dripping hot doubt onto Trust's sleeping face. But Orpheus, he doesn't die for love. He lives through its failure. He walks out of hell empty. And that is the curse. To sing not for joy, but for the thing you can't fix. To keep your back to the grave and your face to the sky, knowing the stars don't care. Knowing the gods gave you a chance, and you broke it. Not with violence. Not with betrayal. But with a moment of human weakness. One backward look. Tragic lovers don't fail because they lack love. They fail because they can't outlast fear. And Orpheus, for all his divine music, was built of mortal flesh. There's no glory in his end. No comfort. Just the long, slow silence of what might have been. He is the shape of regret that never sleeps. He is the voice caught in your throat when the words come too late. And still, his myth lingers. Because we know him. Because we are him. We carry that doubt in every trembling hand that reaches for another. In every step forward that hesitates, just enough to ruin everything. He is not punished for loving. He is punished for needing proof. And that is what breaks the heart. The air was thick with incense, the scent of myrrh clinging to the damp stone walls. A single flame flickered in the darkness, casting elongated shadows that danced like spirits summoned from the abyss. In the heart of the cavern, a circle of figures stood cloaked in silence, their faces hidden beneath hoods, their breaths synchronized in a rhythm that echoed the pulse of the earth itself. They had gathered not for worship, but for transformation, to partake in rites whispered through generations, rites that promised liberation from the mortal coil. At the center stood the Hierophant, his voice a low chant weaving through the air, reciting verses attributed to Orpheus himself. These were not mere words, but keys to unlock the soul's ascent, guiding the initiates through the labyrinth of existence. The Orphic hymn spoke of Dionysus torn apart by the Titans, his essence scattered, only to be reborn, a cycle mirrored in the human soul's journey through life, death, and rebirth. The initiates listened, their hearts pounding, as the boundaries between the physical and the divine blurred. The ritual demanded more than passive participation, it required surrender. Each initiate stepped forward, offering a fragment of their identity to the flames, watching as it turned to ash, a symbolic death to be reborn anew. The air grew heavier, the chants more intense, as the veil between worlds thinned. In that sacred space, time dissolved, and the initiates glimpsed the eternal, their souls momentarily freed from the cycle of reincarnation. But liberation came at a cost. The final test loomed, a command as simple as it was profound: do not look back. As they ascended from the depths, the urge to glance behind, to confirm the reality of their transformation, became overwhelming. Yet, to look back was to anchor oneself to the past, to the very chains they sought to break. The myth of Orpheus served as a cautionary tale. His backward glance condemned him to eternal longing, a reminder that doubt could shatter even the most sacred of journeys. In the silence that followed, the initiates emerged, their eyes reflecting a newfound clarity. They had faced the abyss, confronted their deepest fears, and emerged transformed. The Orphic mysteries had not just offered them knowledge, but a path to transcendence, a way to harmonize the mortal and the divine within. And as they stepped into the light, they carried with them the echoes of ancient chants, the weight of timeless truths, and the unshakable resolve to never look back. A hush falls over the stage. The audience leans forward, breath held, as the first haunting notes of the overture rise. In this moment, Eurydice stands not as a silent shadow, but as a figure of strength and agency. Her voice, once lost to the echoes of myth, now commands the narrative, challenging the traditional confines of her story. Modern interpretations have reimagined Eurydice, granting her a voice that resonates with contemporary audiences. In Sarah Ruhl's play Eurydice, the tale unfolds from her perspective, exploring her choices and desires. This shift in narrative focus empowers Eurydice, transforming her from a passive figure into an active participant in her destiny. Similarly, Margaret Atwood's Orpheus and Eurydice cycle delves into Eurydice's inner world, presenting her as a complex character with autonomy and depth. The operatic world, too, has embraced this evolution. Christoph Willibald Gluck's Orpheus and Eurydice revolutionized the genre by emphasizing emotional expression over ornate vocal displays. The aria, Che Pharaoh sends a Eurydice, captures Orpheus's profound grief, yet it also underscores Eurydice's significance, as her absence becomes the focal point of his lament. Claudio Monteverdi's El Orfeo, one of the earliest operas, presents a rich tapestry of music and drama. Monteverdi's composition elevates the myth, intertwining human emotion with divine intervention. The opera's enduring popularity attests to its powerful portrayal of love and loss. These reinterpretations and performances breathe new life into the ancient myth, highlighting Eurydice's role and the transformative power of music. Through these artistic endeavors, Eurydice emerges not as a mere footnote in Orpheus's story, but as a central figure whose voice continues to inspire and captivate. A man stands alone in the dark, his hands trembling as he clutches a lyre. The strings are silent, yet the air vibrates with a melody only he can hear. He takes a step forward, the ground beneath him echoing with the weight of his sorrow. Each footfall is a heartbeat, each breath a plea to the gods. In the shadows, a figure emerges, Eurydice, her eyes wide with hope and fear. She reaches out, her fingers brushing against his back, a touch so light it could be a whisper. He dares not turn, dares not look, for he knows the price of a single glance. But the silence is unbearable, the absence of her voice a void that threatens to consume him. He stops, his body tense, the lyre slipping from his grasp. It falls to the ground with a dull thud, the strings snapping like the threads of fate. He turns, his eyes meeting hers for a fleeting moment before she fades into the darkness, her scream swallowed by the void. The underworld is unforgiving, a place where the dead linger in shadows and the living are but intruders. Orpheus's journey through this realm is a testament to the power of music, a force so potent it can sway the hearts of gods. His melodies, born of love and desperation, echo through the halls of Hades, softening even the most hardened souls. But the underworld is not easily swayed. It is a place of rules and consequences, where a single misstep can lead to eternal loss. Orpheus's failure is not just a personal tragedy, it is a reflection of the human condition, a reminder of the fragility of trust and the weight of doubt. His story has been told and retold, each version adding new layers of meaning. In Virgil's Georgics, Orpheus's descent is a tale of love and loss, a narrative that resonates through the ages. In Dante's Inferno, the echoes of Orpheus's lyre can be heard in the lamentations of the damned, a haunting reminder of the power of art to transcend even death. The myth of Orpheus and Eurydice has inspired countless artists, from the operas of Gluck and Monteverdi to modern films and literature. Each interpretation offers a new perspective, a fresh lens through which to view this timeless tale. Yet, at its core, the story remains the same, a poignant exploration of love, loss, and the human desire to defy fate. In the end, Orpheus's journey is not just a descent into the underworld, it is a descent into the depths of the human soul. It is a story that continues to captivate, to haunt, and to inspire, a testament to the enduring power of myth. The air was thick with silence, the kind that presses against your chest and makes every breath feel like a betrayal. In the dim glow of the underworld, Orpheus stood motionless, his fingers hovering above the strings of his lyre. Each note he had played was a plea, a desperate cry to the gods, to fate, to anyone who would listen. But now, as he faced the path back to the living world, Eurydice's presence was a mere whisper behind him, a fragile hope tethered to a single, unbreakable rule: do not look back. This command was not just a test of obedience. It was a crucible of trust, a challenge to the very essence of human emotion. Orpheus's heart pounded with doubt, each beat echoing the question that gnawed at his soul: is she truly there? The weight of uncertainty pressed down on him, threatening to crush the resolve he had so painstakingly built. In that moment, the myth transcends its ancient origins, becoming a mirror reflecting our deepest fears and desires. Orpheus's hesitation, his need for confirmation, speaks to the universal human struggle between faith and fear. His story is not just about a man and his lost love. It is about the fragile nature of trust and the devastating consequences of doubt. Throughout history, the tale of Orpheus and Eurydice has been retold, reimagined, and reinterpreted, each version peeling back another layer of the human psyche. In literature, from Virgil's Georgics to Ovid's Metamorphoses, the story has been a canvas for exploring themes of love, loss, and the power of art. In modern times, it has found new life in novels like David Armand's A Song for Ella Gray, where the myth is woven into contemporary narratives, highlighting its enduring relevance. Psychologically, Orpheus's journey can be seen as a metaphor for the grieving process. His descent into the underworld represents the depths of despair, the overwhelming sorrow that follows the loss of a loved one. His music, a manifestation of his grief, becomes a tool for navigating this dark landscape. The prohibition against looking back symbolizes the necessity of moving forward, of not allowing oneself to be consumed by the past. Yet, Orpheus's failure to adhere to this command underscores the difficulty of letting go, the human tendency to cling to memories, to what once was. In the realm of science, the myth has been analyzed through various lenses, including neuroscience and psychology. Studies on memory and trauma suggest that the act of looking back can be both healing and harmful, depending on how one engages with past experiences. Orpheus's backward glance, then, becomes a symbol of this delicate balance, a representation of the fine line between remembrance and obsession. The story's adaptability is evident in its numerous retellings across different cultures and mediums. From operas like Gluck's Orpheus and Eurydice to films like Jean Cocteau's Orphée, the myth has been a source of inspiration for artists seeking to explore the complexities of human emotion. Each adaptation brings a new perspective, shedding light on different facets of the narrative and its characters. In feminist interpretations, Eurydice's role has been re-examined, shifting the focus from Orpheus's journey to her own experiences and agency. Works like Sarah Ruhl's play Eurydice and Carol and Duffy's poem Eurydice give voice to the often silent character, exploring her thoughts, feelings, and choices. These retellings challenge traditional narratives, offering a more nuanced understanding of the myth and its implications. In popular culture, the myth continues to resonate, appearing in various forms such as the video game Hades, where players can interact with Orpheus and Eurydice, influencing their story. This interactive medium allows for a deeper engagement with the characters and themes, demonstrating the myth's enduring appeal and relevance. Ultimately, the story of Orpheus and Eurydice is a testament to the power of love, art, and the human spirit. It is a narrative that captures the essence of what it means to be human, to feel deeply, to hope against hope, and to confront the consequences of our choices. As we continue to retell and reinterpret this ancient myth, we uncover new truths about ourselves and the world around us, ensuring that the tale of Orpheus and Eurydice remains as poignant and powerful as ever. The air trembles with a silence so profound it feels like the world has stopped breathing. In the dim glow of a theater, a lone figure stands, poised at the edge of the stage, their shadow stretching into the abyss beyond. A single note escapes from their lips, haunting and raw, slicing through the stillness like a blade. This is not just a performance, it's a resurrection of a tale as old as time, yet as immediate as the next heartbeat. Orpheus and Eurydice, names that echo through the corridors of history, their story retold in countless forms, each iteration a mirror reflecting our deepest fears and desires. In modern film and literature, their myth is not merely recounted, it is relived, reimagined, and reinterpreted, each version peeling back layers of human emotion to reveal the raw, unfiltered essence beneath. In Sarah Ruhl's play Eurydice, the narrative shifts, granting Eurydice her own voice, her own agency. Here, the underworld is not just a place of death, but a realm of memory and language, where Eurydice's struggle is not to return to life, but to retain her identity amidst the erasure of the past. It's a poignant exploration of love and loss, where the act of remembering becomes both a blessing and a curse. Cinema, too, has embraced the myth's enduring power. In Black Orpheus, the tale is transplanted to the vibrant streets of Rio during Carnival, where the lovers' dance is both literal and metaphorical, a celebration of life shadowed by the inevitability of death. The film pulsates with color and rhythm, yet beneath the surface lies the same tragic heartbeat, the same inexorable pull of fate. The musical, Hadestown, reimagines the myth in a post-apocalyptic setting, where Eurydice descends into the underworld not through death, but through desperation. Here, the underworld is a factory, a place of toil and forgetfulness, and Orpheus's journey becomes a battle against the dehumanizing forces of industrialization. The music is both a lament and a rallying cry, a testament to the enduring power of love and art in the face of despair. In literature, the myth finds new life in works like David Armand's A Song for Ella Gray, where the story unfolds in the contemporary world, yet retains its mythic resonance. Ella Gray is both Eurydice and every young woman on the cusp of adulthood, her fate intertwined with the music and magic that Orpheus embodies. The novel captures the heady rush of first love, the ache of loss, and the haunting question, what would you sacrifice to bring someone back? Even in the realm of fashion, the myth exerts its influence. Gia Coppola's film, created in collaboration with Gucci, presents a modern retelling set against the backdrop of New York City. The characters move through the urban landscape, their designer attire juxtaposed with the timeless narrative of love and loss. It's a visual symphony, where every garment, every setting, contributes to the storytelling, blurring the lines between past and present, myth and reality. These retellings are not mere repetitions, they are reinventions, each one a testament to the myth's adaptability and relevance. They delve into the psychological depths of the characters, exploring themes of grief, memory, and the human tendency to look back, even when warned not to. As one analysis suggests, Orpheus's backward glance is not just a moment of doubt, but a profound expression of human vulnerability, a refusal to let go of love, even at the cost of everything. In these modern interpretations, the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice becomes a canvas upon which contemporary artists paint their own fears and hopes. It's a story that refuses to die, continually reborn in new forms, each one resonating with the eternal human struggle to hold on to love in the face of inevitable loss. As the final note fades and the stage lights dim, the silence returns, heavy with the weight of the story just told. Yet, in that silence, the myth lingers, a whisper in the darkness, a reminder that some stories are too powerful to ever truly end.